Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to our evening presentation tonight. Tonight we'll hear from Dr. David Batstone as the inaugural entrepreneurial speaker for the K&K Doima Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation Speaker Series. Dordt University has been able to welcome Dr. Batstone to campus this evening through the cooperation of many centers and departments here on campus, including the K&K Doima Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, the Andreas Center for Reformed Scholarship and Service, the Community Development Department, the Social Work Department, and the Business, Accounting, and Economics Department. Born in Illinois, David lived and worked for years in San Francisco. He has some incredible work and life experience, like being a journalist for the New York Times and Chicago Tribune, an author of the books Not for Sale and Saving the Corporate Soul. He's a former professor at the University of San Francisco and is a venture capitalist. David is also a speaker and consultant who works with entrepreneurs and investors to create forward-thinking companies. In a moment, we will all be able to hear and feel his passions for bringing dignity to people and planet. Dr. Batstone is the founder and managing director of Just Business, a social impact investment firm. His portfolio includes successful ventures like Rebel, Relocity, American Battery, Hydra Energy, Not for Sale, and more. David also enjoys hiking, biking, and swimming. Tonight's presentation is entitled Purpose, Passion, and Profit. Aligning these 3 P's might change your life. Will you please join me in welcoming Dr. David Batstone?
Well, it's been so much fun being back in the Midwest, and I thank you for the warm welcome I have had in the classes all day with different students. And appreciated their interest and enthusiasm and engagement. So it's been a great day, and we'll cap it off tonight for those of you who I have not yet had the opportunity to bore yet today. You get your chance now. I am very reminded by being on campus today of just graduating and trying to figure out where should I go to follow my passion. And you know, I really do encourage students to carry a few things with them as they move towards, either graduating or thinking about life beyond university. One is that life is a gift, and yet it's too short if you're not pursuing what you're most passionate about. So I encourage you to follow your passion and to find a purpose, your calling, and to be curious about how you can continue to grow and develop. Now, when I graduated from a small school in California, very similar to Dordt University, called Westmont College. It's somewhat of a sister school to Wheaton College, so very similar in structure and approach. You know, I studied psychology at Westmont College, and so when I graduated, I wanted to take a year and go and work with a poor population somewhere in the world, and for some reason it had always been a calling on my heart that I would work among the poor. And I had an opportunity to go and live in the inner city of a large Australian city called Melbourne. And there I was going to be an intern, I was going to be a volunteer with a halfway house for kids who were sleeping on the streets, had just come out of juvenile delinquent home, or had some kind of trouble as a teenager, and they needed short-term accommodation. It was run by a Christian community, and I was looking forward to spending a year. I would figure out a little bit more about my purpose as I did my passion. Well, it was really a surprise to me when I showed up in Australia at this mission to work with this accommodation counseling center for street kids. It was a real shock that the director of the program had a personal crisis, and they asked me to take over the program. I was 22 years old, that didn't have that much experience. They said, well, you're a psychology major. I had to explain to them, in America, when you get a liberal arts education, you're really not that prepared to do anything. Right? I mean, what did I take? I took psychology. I learned about abnormal psychology. Kind of like a schizophrenic, not so much bipolar, right? Also, my great achievement as an undergrad was I had a Skinner box, is where you put a little rat into a Skinner box. I don't know if you do that here at this university. And then you train the rat by giving rewards. So it's kind of learning about reward behavior, so that if the rat hangs out in the right corner and you want him to move, you stop feeding him. Little by little, he'll kind of move around the cage. He moves to the left corner, you give him a reward. So now he's hanging out in the left corner. Right? So then, I decided, well, I'm going to throw a marble in there. And so I would only reward the rat when he was able to put his paw on the marble. And so soon he's kind of like palming the marble. Right? And so then I stopped rewarding him, and he's kind of getting frantic, and then he holds the marble up with two hands. And then I reward him, so now he's walking around with a marble. Then I put a little basket in there, and I only reward him when he made a basket. I kid you not, I taught my rat how to play basketball. I was going to get like 5 jerseys, have different rats when I graduated. Okay, so now they want me to take over a center for homeless kids in Melbourne because I learned how to teach a rat to play basketball. All right, so the best challenge of my life at that age. Now I had all these kids coming in who had been sleeping on the streets. Toughened kids would come from all over, and I'm the director because I had a psychology major. All right, it's like, oh, you have a business major. You should run IBM. And so it was really great. I think my 5th day in the job, this guy shows up, and a probation worker with this young man, 16 years old. His name is Ken. And Ken would walk in, and he was so angry, he would hold his fist like this. So he'd walk into this halfway house, and the probation officers explained to me why he had been in prison. He had stolen a car, and he also had a robbery, and now he's out of prison. He's trying to change his life, and he's going to come live with me for a while. So I introduced myself, say, "Hey, Ken, how are you doing? It's nice to meet you." And he kind of looks at me for a little bit, and he says, "You're a damn Yank, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I am from the United States. I hate damn Yanks." Like, good. Well, we should really get along then, This is awesome. So we have rules in the house that, I had probably 8 kids at one time living with me, and at 10 o'clock the lights go off, everyone goes to their room. You can lie awake in your bed all night, but you had to be out of the common room and the lights out in the house. So first night, it's 10 o'clock, I go into the common room, I tell everyone it's time to go to their room. Ken's just sitting there, angry as can be. And I say, "Ken, it's 10 o'clock, you have to go to your room." He just stays there, doesn't say a word to me. So I say, "Listen, Ken, if you don't want to stay here, that's okay. I'll go on the phone, call your probation worker. If you want to stay here, you just have to follow the rules, but otherwise you can go." So he stands up, walks straight towards me, walks right by me, opens the front door, slams it shut, and he disappears. I think, okay, well, there's Ken. I go to sleep. Everyone else in the house is asleep. I think it's 1 or 2 in the morning. I get this knock on the door, and I'm kind of half awake because I've been sleeping. And I go to the front door, and there's Ken, and he's got blood all running down his fist. I said, "Ken, what happened to you?" He said, "I was so angry. I walked out the door. I went across the street to the park. I saw a tree, and it was your face. I punched it as hard as I can." And so I congratulated him on his ability to displace anger, welcomed him in, and then he stayed with me for the next 8 weeks. It's so funny because our halfway house was connected to a ministry of a church. We did not require the young people to go to church, but we would invite them. Said, if you want to go to church Sunday morning, we have a worship service together. That wasn't a requirement of staying there. So first Saturday, Ken goes, "Hey, damn Yank." I was never anything to him but damn Yank, by the way. "Hey, damn Yank." I said, "Yes, Ken." I hear there's church tomorrow, right? I go, yeah. I hate church. I'm not going. And I go, okay, you don't have to. Okay, I just want to let you know I'm not going. All right, next Saturday. Hey, damn yank, I told you I'm not going to church. I go, you don't have to. Not part of being here. Third Saturday he comes. Damn yank, I'm going to church tomorrow. I go, okay, you can come. All right, so the next day he shows up. We go to church together, and this is a Baptist community, and during the Baptist community, they would have a baptismal in the front, and they would, put back the board, and they would baptize people as an adult. On this particular Sunday that Ken came, there was a young woman who was being baptized, and the community would circle the baptismal, and they would all hold hands and they'd sing together, "Welcome to the family of God." And so as this woman is coming out, they're singing "Welcome to the family of God," and this tough Ken, he's just bursting into tears. Just bursting into tears. And I said, "Ken, what's wrong?" And he said, my mom abandoned me in a hotel room at the age of 2. I've been bouncing from foster family to foster family. I got kicked out of every family I went, and I would never be loved anywhere. And it was the first time I've ever heard anyone say I could be a part of a family again. And he came to know Jesus. That experience, going to Melbourne, fundamentally changed my life, throwing me into a situation where I met new responsibilities, learned more about my skill sets. I didn't realize I was a leader. I could run a program. I could manage people. I learned so much about myself because I put myself in a situation of following my passion, finding a purpose. And then it was about, now, what is the strategy for my life? How do I be profitable in what I do? Tonight I want to run you through my own process of how I ended up then becoming a venture capitalist, and I'm going to skip a few steps along the way. I'm a venture capitalist in San Francisco because I wanted to learn how to use finance to scale impact, to scale and grow companies. And I had gone away from years of ministry in order to learn how to be successful as a venture capitalist. But life has a funny way, or I should say, God uses life in a funny way to bring you back to your center, back to your calling. And after I spent several years in Silicon Valley, one day I learned that my favorite restaurant in San Francisco was a human trafficking ring that brought over 500 teenagers from the area of Bangalore, India, into California for the purpose of forced labor. First in this restaurant, and then into fruit and vegetable fields and brothels in Northern California. Slavery in my own backyard. These young girls would be forced to work. Their families would be threatened back in India if they complained or made some kind of protest against their behavior, what happened to them. I really came to the belief that God puts events in your lives to bring you back to your calling. It's just whether are we willing to listen. Right? Are we willing to listen to the original passion and purpose that God's given us? And in my case, I needed to go around the world and figure this out. I needed to take a leave of absence from my venture capitalist bank, and I needed to go and follow this trail of young girls who've been captured, children who were in captivity. God had put on my heart that you have to set the captives free. Fight human trafficking. Arrest it. Stop it. So how do we arrest human trafficking? 30 million people in the world. How do we change what's happening to our environment? How do we stop extreme poverty? How do we bring the untold masses to know more about the good news? So many challenges, but where do I start? It always starts with one step. If you're wondering, well, what should I do next? Take one step towards your passion. And there you will find some purpose. Take one step towards your passion. For me, as Professor Hoekstra has already mentioned, I was a journalist when I first out of university. I knew how to investigate, I knew how to write, and I decided that I would take 1 year, one step to fight human trafficking by writing a book, investigating it, exposing it, and telling the story of it. And so I went on this journey, and I talked this morning about meeting this remarkable woman by the name of Krunam. Krunam was a wonderful artist in Thailand, and she discovered human trafficking in the north of Thailand and began to rescue children in the north of Thailand who were in karaoke bars. Young kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, who were being forced to sell their bodies to males who would come from all over the world to do things to them that they would be arrested for doing in their own home country. Krunam was a very brave person and started rescuing these kids by running into a karaoke bar. She would grab them and just run out of the restaurant. Right? When I met her, I heard about this woman living in the north of Thailand. She had 27 kids and no plan. She didn't have any strategy. She just knew she had to get the kids out of this situation of trafficking. And so it was a matter of providence that God brought Krunam and I together just as she had rescued 27 kids and just as I was looking for a way to stop human trafficking. I met her here in the north of Thailand, and if you can see this particular building, it's made out of palm leaves, the roof. There's 4 wood posts, a dirt floor, and this is where Krunam and her 27 kids were living. When I met her, I said, you know, I just want to make a pledge to you. I'm going to take a second step. My first step was simply, I'm going to write a book. I meet Krunam and said, okay, second step, I'm going to build a home for you and your 27 kids. And so, having made that promise, I came back to San Francisco, and before I could even begin to put together all of the resources that I needed to build this home in Thailand, I got a communication from Krunam that their only shelter had burnt down, and now she had rescued 53 kids. Right? I said, okay, I'll build you 2 homes. Now the steps are getting faster. Now a third step. Right? And before I could even finish actually gathering the resources I needed, she had rescued 108 kids. So I decided to go to churches, Rotary clubs, business associations, wealthy people, to start to ask if they would help me build a village in northern Thailand for rescued kids. And that village still exists today and thrives today. We have, at any one time, 150 kids living at this village. And they learn how to grow their own food. They are engaged in learning in school. They learn skill sets for providing their own future. And these kids who have gone through terrible things at the age of 10, 11, and 12 learn to have a new identity. They begin to see themselves as not a former victim of human trafficking, but a basketball player or a artist or a mathematician, or they start creating new identities based on the new experiences they have in a community where they're safe and they're loved. And as I explained this morning, probably the thrill of my life is to see these first kids I met, the first 27 kids, the first ones I met are now going to some of the top universities in Thailand and graduating. And so for me, you know, in a way, that could be the end of the story. I would feel like I've achieved something, and I believe that that is a beautiful expression of a calling. But I'm also driven by profit. And by profit, I mean not so much making a lot of money, but by being impactful, being strategic, actually arresting human trafficking. If I can stop human trafficking in the world, that's profitable. Right? My purpose is to address the exploitation of people. My profit is to make it real. And my passion is I love waking up every day, lucky that I can fight for the rights of people. But I don't do that by simply being happy by telling you I rescued 27 kids. I want to rescue 27 million kids. So if that's my purpose and profit, how do I come up with strategies? How do I come up with new ways of reaching that goal? For me, it started a new revolution in my thinking when I took what I did in Thailand and I took it to another country in Peru. There, we met a number of children going through the same experience, living on the streets of Lima, having the same experience of being taken advantage of, sold for sex. And we learned that most of these kids were coming from the Amazon area of Peru. All right, so we were at the bottom of a river pulling out these kids that were drowning in Lima, northern Thailand, and we said, you know what, we need to address slavery at the top of the river. We need to go to the roots. And so we did, in terms of thinking of a new model that would end it, not simply address the consequences or the cause or the symptoms. The other thing that we learned is that we had the bad business model. We had a very bad business model. It's called charity. Now, for some reason, I was very successful in Silicon Valley building companies in technology and in other products. But when it came to fighting human trafficking, I realized that I turned off my brain and I opened up my heart. That is, the things that made me successful in business, I didn't use towards fighting things like human trafficking or poverty. I started a bad business model, was a charity. I would beg you for money. All right, I'd come and say, could you please give me a donation tonight? If I'm over here in Silicon Valley, I'm saying, I'm going to give you a great opportunity to make an investment. I'm going to give you a great opportunity to buy my product. I'm going to give you a great opportunity to fuel what I do because you believe in what my product or my service is providing. Over here, I'm begging you to help me. Where's the disconnect? I decided that I would try to apply what I was learning in Silicon Valley to fighting the things I most valued and cared about. So what would it look like to use the same principles of creating value for a cause, a ministry, a mission? And that was my goal. So I decided to start a beverage company. Now, I went through the whole experience earlier today about how we came about with the idea for the beverage company, but I'll just say this. We decided that if we're going to go upstream and help the families who were losing their children in the Amazon of Peru, their kids are ending up in the streets and brothels of Lima, that we need to create a new reality for them, a new economic platform, a new way of being stable so that they could not be taken advantage of so quickly. So we started this beverage company called Rebel, which is an acronym for roots, extract, bark, berry, leaves. Be a rebel. Be different. Drink a beverage that's good for you. It has great medicinal herbs. It's plant-based. It's organic. Drink differently, but do it because you're also, every time you buy a bottle of Rebel, you're fighting human trafficking. You're giving jobs to people back in the Amazon of Peru. We will take more money that you give us for the product and we'll return it back to Peru. So last year, we gave $1.5 million back to the communities that source these ingredients for us from the purchases of our beverage. So this was the first company I started around creating impact and scaling impact through a business model. Now, having done this, I thought, okay, what would be another way of applying this model? What would be another way of creating opportunity that would be changing the reality of people who are facing human trafficking? The first model was using venture capital. People would give an investment to me, I would invest it in the company, and then we would grow the company through venture capital. The second model in Holland was to use the nonprofit, not for sale, as a way of creating a business that would be wholly owned by the nonprofit, not for sale. A different business model. We weren't looking for investors. We were looking to build a successful business. It's a remarkable story, and I even feel it's a miracle when I tell or share that story. This woman here is a Dutch woman by the name of Toos Heemskerk. For 16 years, she was working with young women in the red light district. Most of them come from Eastern Europe. They come from places like Moldova, Hungary, Ukraine, and they would come to Amsterdam thinking that they were coming to work in an office, they were coming to work in some kind of restaurant, but they ended up rather in a brothel. And I don't know if any of you have been to the red light district in Amsterdam, but it's like shop windows that you'll see in a major city where your mannequins are dressed up. Instead of the mannequins, you have live young girls for sale, many of them teenagers. And again, men will come for a sex holiday in Amsterdam and buy a girl for as many minutes or hours or days as they will pay for, right? So when I met Toos, she told me that she had tracked the story of every young girl that had come into the windows in Amsterdam. She said 2 out of 3 of them, so 66%, are trafficked. They're not there because they choose a life of prostitution. Someone is forcing them and managing, controlling them, that they cannot leave or go to some other life, a sex slave. 16 years working with these young girls, mostly helping them with their legal problems, their spiritual problems, their family crisis. And so I was really, with Toos, I was just overwhelmed with her commitment. And I said, I'm just so proud to meet you, and I really love what you do. She goes, well, I'm honored, but, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to stop doing it. And I said, well, why are you going to stop? She said, because I promise these young girls if they get away from the windows, if they leave their life, if they can escape their trafficker, that there's a better life for them. But I'm lying to them. There is no better life. They can't go back to Hungary or Moldova. They'll be trafficked again. And they can't stay here. The only visa they have, even though Holland and the Netherlands is very proud of being tolerant, they give these young girls an entertainment visa, which really is a visa to sell sex. And they're not given the opportunity, I'm going to leave that work and maybe be a restaurant worker, or I'm going to be, anything other than what they are in the red light district. So Toos said, I think I'm going to quit. And I said, well, listen, I've just started a beverage company in Peru that we now sell this drink in the United States. I want to see if we can create the same model here and in the Netherlands. So let's figure out a company that we would start together that would end up being an employer for these young women. And so we decided that we would start a soup company. Originally, it was a soup company because the Dutch really love their soup. I don't know if the Dutch in Iowa and Michigan love their soup as much as the Dutch in the Netherlands, but every corner there seems like a soup place. And so we said, let's find the best chef in the Netherlands. Let's work with that chef to create a quality product, and our first customers will be the women behind the windows in the red light district. All right, so we start developing this soup. We take it out to the windows in the red light district. We say to these young women, would you like to buy soup today? It's €4, because we're a company. We're not a charity. We're a company. Maybe one day you could work for us, but would you like to buy our soup? And they would say, sure, I love that soup. It's a goulash like my grandmother used to make. And so we would start building a customer base among the sex workers in Amsterdam. And so eventually we started a texting service. They would text us and say, what's the soup today? We'd let them know and say, can you bring it between 3 and 3:30 when I'm not seeing a John? And so that we had this, 300, 350 soup orders a day, very small. And again, take one step. If you're going to do a project, just test it out. 300, 350 customers. Figure out whether it works or not. If you're going to fail, learn early on that's going to not work. But this really was successful in a certain respect at a very small level. So here I am, a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, business experience, And I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I forgot to think about even getting a business license to operate. Right? We just set up the kitchen in the red light district. We started selling the soup. I was thinking of it almost like a ministry, not like a business. Again, my bad. So the chief of police of Amsterdam contacts our organization, Not for Sale, and says, you know what? I'd like your team to come in. I want to talk to you. And we thought, oh my gosh, we didn't get a license. We're going to get busted here. So we go in and we talk to him, and he goes, I hear you are selling soup in the red light district. I said, yes, we are. We hear it's really good soup. He says, best soup in Holland. We get all kinds of rave reviews. He said, well, can you start catering all of our police precincts? All right? Could you start bringing your soup every day to the police? Because we want to support what you're doing. I was reflecting this morning with the entrepreneurial students that if you're going to start a business, you can get prostitutes and cops as your first customers. It's a great demographic. All right? So the miracle keeps growing because the momentum of the entrepreneurship continues to push forward, right? The head of the largest grocery store chain in the Netherlands then came to us and said, you know what? I'm CEO of Hema, which is a very large grocery store chain here. I want to sell your soup. Right? So we began selling this soup is not for sale on the shelves of 650 stores. Now, I have a great problem. I now have a lot of demand for my soup and not enough supply. It's always better as a business entrepreneur to have more demand than supply. Because you can have a lot of supply and no demand. It's called bankruptcy. Right? But if you have a lot of demand, then you can build your supply. So I always recommend, if you're going to start a business, figure out your customers before you start figuring out your production. All right? Testing your customers. If there are customers who want to buy your product or they'll have some adjustment of your product, you can always change your supply chain. You can always change how you supply that product. So there was a huge demand for our soup. And this was the opportunity we were waiting for. I said, okay, let's start a culinary school, a cooking school, and we will invite the women who are in the red light district to be our chefs, to learn how to be caterers, to learn how to work in a food industry, because we have jobs waiting that we need fulfillment for. I'm a big believer in always going for the top talent, because top talent or leaders will always figure out how to make an institution or organization or business work. So I called the most famous chef in the world, Jamie Oliver, who is in the UK, and I said to him, listen, I want to explain my project to you. Would you help me build a culinary school? You know how to do this. And he said, of course, I'd love to help you. So we set up a culinary school in Amsterdam, and we began then to train these women how to make soup first. Then the miracle continues. The mayor of Amsterdam contacted us and said, oh my gosh, I love what you're doing in the red light district. He said, it really troubles my conscience that Amsterdam is the brothel of Europe. We get men coming from all over Europe and all over the world so they can have a sex holiday for a weekend and buy these young girls. But why do we do that? We have Rembrandt, and we have Van Gogh, we have Anne Frank, we have canals, we have so much, right, in Amsterdam. Why are we selling our soul? And so he said, I'm going to close half the red light district. Now, this is when you have an innovative, disruptive idea. You give other people the opportunity to change their course, right? Everyone thinks the world is so set we can never change anything. But once you disrupt the accepted system, it's not okay to sell women. It's not okay to sell young girls behind shop windows. Once you disrupt that notion, it pricks the conscience of those who otherwise don't have the courage to make a bold decision, no? So the mayor to say, I'm going to shut down half the red light district was catalyst. It was a catalyst, our restaurants. The CEO of the largest grocery store chain, I want to sell your soup so we can tell the story of prostitution and exploitation in Holland. It's a catalyst because we created the opportunity. So the reason you need to be bold is to create a catalyst for change. Your passion changes the purpose for other people. They realize their purpose because of your passion. But if you don't have passion, you just say, well, I can't change anything. I can't do anything. Then the world seems impermeable. You can't change it, right? Nothing will be different. The mayor of Amsterdam says, okay, I'm going to take a brothel, and I want you to use it to create a restaurant now. Right? We have chefs. We have caterers. We know how to make soup. Now we expand our menu so that we have brunch and we have a beautiful lunch, and we expand our menu, and we have our first restaurant, and we call it Dignita, or Dignity. We do not advertise our ministry or mission in the promotion of our restaurants. We don't want people coming to a zoo to see former prostitutes now cooking omelets, yeah? We want people to come because they hear it's a fantastic restaurant. We want to have a beautiful menu. We want to have beautiful food. We want to make sure that the best quality service so that we're recognized as a restaurant you want to go to. And we've achieved that. We have lines, 15, 30-minute lines every Saturday, Sunday morning. You can't get in the restaurant. Vogue magazine calls us one of the top 10 restaurants in the Netherlands. And not because of our ministry, it's because of our quality of service. So this first restaurant was then enough profit came from that first restaurant that we were able to build a second restaurant. And this is one of the most beautiful sites in Amsterdam. I know some of you go in and out of Amsterdam. I encourage you to go Dignita and go to this restaurant. It's outdoor, indoor. And that restaurant, the second restaurant, was so profitable that we opened a third restaurant and then a fourth restaurant. Now, this is all owned by Not For Sale, the nonprofit. So what I've been playing with, what I've been trying to do through profit, is to figure out what is the best model for the best situation to create an opportunity for those that are vulnerable to have a destiny. Yeah? And so Rebel was created with venture capital, with investors, to build a national brand in the United States, and we could source the ingredients, first in Peru and now in 32 countries in the world. This is a nonprofit-owned enterprise, and we use the profits to build new restaurants and to fund our culinary school. So we're opening a fifth restaurant in The Hague. So that will be opening later this summer. All right, so that's a different model. But it still felt to me like we're not scaling enough. Right? It was purposeful, it's passion, but it hasn't scaled to the level. If I'm going to try to address the needs of 27 million people, I got to come up with a better idea. Now, just like when I was back in university and I was learning how to train a rat how to play basketball, and then I went to Halfway House in Melbourne, and now I had to teach kids who I couldn't have a rat dispenser, unfortunately, and they weren't getting rewarded that way. But I had to now take those skills and keep learning. Then I learned that there's human trafficking in the world, and I started a nonprofit and a charity, and I learned that's not going to do it. It's constantly evolving and learning. You see, what you're doing in university right now is preparing yourself for a lifelong adventure of learning. You're learning the tools to get smarter every week. Can you say you're smarter this week than you were last week? If not, what the heck are you doing? You should be smarter this week than last week. I was telling Brian, I'm so lucky he didn't invite me a month ago, because you would have got a much dumber lecture than you're getting tonight. Right? I'm on fire tonight. Wait till next week. Yeah, right? Okay. So how do you keep evolving and learning? And you use the experiences of what you've gone through to prepare yourself for the next adventure. That's what passion is. Passion is evolving, growing, learning, because you're so excited about what you learned, you want to apply it in a new way. Having gone through this experience, said, okay, I need to take it up another level now. Yeah, Rebel's doing great. We're now sourcing ingredients in 32 countries. We choose the ingredient based on the most impact, not the cheapest ingredient. So when we're having impact for 75,000 families who are farmers around the world today, right? That was great. All right, Amsterdam. All right, we have 5 restaurants. We have a culinary school. I want to take it up a level. I want the biggest and most important companies in the world on my side. All right? I want them fighting human trafficking and forced mobility with me. So, we had to think about, and this is brainstorming, we had to think about how do we get Apple, Facebook, Google, Pfizer, Moderna, Nike, Walmart, Starbucks, Tesla, IBM, Intel, how do we get all those companies on our side? Now, I could go to them. Let's take my old mentality. I could go to them and try and convince them. There's this wonderful woman named Krunam. She's rescuing kids. She's a real hero. She really is. Could you please just give me a little bit of money, Apple? Please, Starbucks, just give me one store profit. Just give me a little bit of money, right? And I will get turned down. Because it's not in their business model. Maybe they give me a little bit of money, corporate philanthropy, but it's not in their business model to fund exploitation and suffering. Let's face it. So I said, okay, I need to change the business model. So what are they concerned about when it comes to mobility? They want to hire the best talent in the world, all the companies I just mentioned. If you're a talented data engineer and you're living in Sioux Center, you will be able to get a job with one of these companies because they are looking for the best talent. And they will move you from Sioux Center to New York, Los Angeles, London. That world is a world of mobility. Yeah? And, I have 4 kids. They're all being hired by these companies, my own personal kids, because they have the vision that they can work for them. I really challenge you to think big about your aspirations of where you will work. Unless you want to live in Sioux Center for the rest of your life. That's cool too. But there is an opportunity for you to reach big around being a marketing person, being a data engineer, learning ways to do quality control on products. There is a world if you so choose, but you have to lift your expectations. This is what passion's about. Right? Passion is, I believe in myself, and I'm going to go out and follow my dream. All right, so Apple, Facebook, Google, all these companies. And when they do move you from Sioux Center to New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Omaha, when you move, you've got a lot of needs. You've got to figure out, let's say, a dentist. You've got to figure out a medical doctor. You need to figure out how to get a driver's license. Open a bank account. You need to figure out where to live. If you're a little bit older and you have kids, you need to figure out where your kids are going to go to school. There's a lot of things when you move. And the wonderful thing about working for one of these companies, they say, don't worry, we want you to work in our company. We don't want you worrying about how you're going to live your life. So we went to them and said, let us be the personal concierge that helps your mobility workers, people who are in movement, people who are leaving, going from one place to another. Pay us to take care of your staff, your workers, your executives, your managers, your employees. They loved it. So we created first a personal concierge so that Apple says, okay, we're going to move you to New York. And then Julie, who's on our staff, would say, hey, how can I help you? Where do you want to live? There's a good neighborhood. Or what kind of dental needs? They go through the whole list and help you. Now, after a while, we could then take that content, how many dentists there are within Manhattan, and which are the best ones, and how can I get an appointment? We can put it into an AI, or artificial intelligence machine, and now it's very app-driven, where you go on, you're in a new city. It's kind of like a Yelp on steroids. I need a dentist. Okay, here's the best one, and you're in a neighborhood. You can get an appointment at 2 o'clock on Thursday. Wow. Right? They're my personal assistant. So Apple pays us, And what we do then is we take a percentage of what Apple pays us, and we pay or we invest in the lives of refugees and human trafficking victims. So now Apple is paying us to take care of refugees. Okay, they don't see it that way. They just think they're paying us for a service. But we see it that way. They're paying us to take care of refugees and human trafficking victims. And so then at the end of the year, we go to Apple and say, congratulations, you just invested $100,000 this year in human trafficking victims. They said, we did? Yeah, because we take the money and we put it into not for sale. And then they say to their, to the world, oh my gosh, we're helping refugees. Right? They tell their staff and their workers, we're helping refugees. They go, oh my God, that's amazing. And then sometimes the company will say, hey, can we match what you give? Because Apple will now match what you do, right? Now they're on your side. Right? Now they're on your side. This company is called Relocity. Airbnb is our customer. Uber is our customer. You name a big company in America, they're now our customer. And it's a way of using technology to empower companies to serve their own workers, yes. That's their priority. But in doing so, they're serving the population of people that we want to address. Those who are most vulnerable, those who are living in great danger and crisis. So, we now operate all over the world. The wonderful thing about this company, Relocity, and we own 33% of the company, we're the only investor, is that Tesla, for instance, is setting up factories in Shanghai, Berlin, and Austin, Texas right now for batteries. And so they pay us to go ahead and take care of their workers. Now, we don't have a staff or we don't have infrastructure in any of those cities, Berlin, Shanghai, or Austin. But they pay us to take care of their staff, their workers. And now we build infrastructure because Tesla's paid us. We turn around and we go over to Facebook and Google and Twitter. We say, hey, we're now in Austin and Shanghai and Berlin. They go, oh, great, we want to work with you too there. Right? So your profit margin keeps going up because you built the infrastructure based on the operational expenditures you built for your first one, paid by Tesla. So this company is one of the most creative and remarkable companies that I've been a part of. It wasn't started by us. It was started by a German man who moved from Germany to LA, and he found it so difficult to adjust to LA. And then I met him, and he said, look, I have this idea for a company. What do you think? And I said, you know what? I will invest in you if you do this. If you give, out of every dollar we receive, we give money to refugees and human trafficking victims. He goes, that's a great idea. I love that. And that's how partnership was born. All right, so ideas can catalyze change. Right? Again, it's following your passion, following your purpose, and making it profitable. I know there's a certain suspicion among people who have a strong social conscience or a strong ministry conscience or a strong kind of mission focus that somehow if you're making money, you must be doing something wrong. Right? If you're doing the Lord's work, you should be poor. You should be struggling. You should be, in fact, be faithful that somehow tomorrow's paycheck will show up or a donation will show up and save you. I don't know where that idea comes from, but it's very convoluted because what happens is those organizations, they struggle and they don't grow and they have a very difficult time expanding their ministry. But thinking strategically about how you build a business model around your purpose and mission changes everything. Because now you're talking about addressing the needs you care about, the things that are most important to your heart, and you have new players on board, customers, companies, and you're creating recurring revenue where I'm not here tonight to ask you for a donation. I'm asking you when you go to a store, buy a Rebel. Why are you drinking Coca-Cola for gosh sakes? Corrodes your guts, I'm talking about a healthy drink. Beautiful herbs from the Amazon of Peru. Good for you and good for the world. When you go to Amsterdam, go to one of my restaurants. Why are you going to other restaurants? You see what my thinking is? Is changing the mentality of how we contribute to a better world. So I actually through this process, I started out with a passion for people. But as I spent more time in the Amazon, and I also just living in the world, seeing the change in climate and the change in what's happening to our environment, I said, you know what? That's God's environment too. It's not only God's people, it's God's planet. And I began to think about ways that we could now take the scale that we learned through velocity, which is fast relocation, like velocity, relocity. Now, how do we start building change for the future of energy? Now our vision's up here, my team and I. Now we're thinking about, okay, how do we change the way that people drive a car? They drive a truck. And part of that is seeing the future ahead of you. I call it pattern intelligence. Maybe on that wall, a lot of people see dots. Maybe you see a pattern, right? And when you see that pattern, you say, well, how do I start companies? How do I start taking advantage? How do I start creating opportunities that I see 10 years in the future? It doesn't take much of a genius to know that automobiles and trucks and buses and everything that moves us and vehicles in the next 10 years is going to change dramatically. It's going to move towards electric, and it's going to move towards hydrogen. And I had a whole session today with a group of students around looking at that horizon. But really what I wanted to say was, if you look at that transition, the expectation of how quickly it will happen, by the year 2030, we will not be making diesel cars in Detroit for any state in California. California will not sell anything but electric cars. How's that possible? Norway, there's more electric cars today than there are internal combustion engine or diesel cars, right? In Europe, by the end of next year, there will be, in all of Europe, more electric cars. So if you look at that, you say, okay, knowing that's coming and knowing that I want to be a part of investing towards that future, how do I start pursuing opportunities within that world and starting to build the kind of network and investments I need to take advantage of what's happening? Right? Instead of just saying, I'm going to wait and see what happens, then maybe I'll go out and try and find a job in that sector. You know that's going to happen. So why aren't you taking advantage of your knowledge? Why aren't you taking one step, two step, three step? For those of you who see this happening and you want to be in a career that's greening the world, if you want to call it. So Blackstone is a company that we started, or we're part of, where we make batteries using 3D printing. You know, it's like 3D printing a design on a t-shirt. We 3D print batteries. And this whole world is incredible because of the fact that we can print a battery for whatever kind of machine you have. We can make a battery for a scooter, one of those Lime scooters. We can make one for a bus. We can make one for a truck. So we make batteries for the future of electric. Our first battery battery manufacturing plant is in Germany, and we're now going to build one in the U.S., maybe Iowa. So 3D printing batteries. Then I look ahead and I say, okay, hydrogen is going to be as important for the future because hydrogen burns water, right? H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. You separate them, you burn hydrogen, and you can run a vehicle. And so I got behind a company called Hydra Energy. It was one of my former students. My company, and Not for Sale, got involved and invested. And now we're running trucks in Canada on hydrogen. Right? It seems science fiction. It seems so far off, but it's coming so quickly. Look at the pattern on the wall. It's coming. So being a part of that world requires a few things. One is you believe in what you're saying. You have a passion for being involved in something that's redesigning the future rather than holding on to the past. You have a purpose because you want to be in a job that is creating a better planet, and it will be super profitable. And it will fund the next project that you want to do to redesign the world. I said to the first group at 8 o'clock this morning, I want you all to be wealthy. That's my goal tonight. I want you to be wealthy, but I want you to be wealthy because you're designing a better world. You're following your passion and your purpose, and you're finding a way to fuel that passion and purpose so that you can keep doing it until that time where you stop learning, and that should be at a point in time when you're no longer breathing. So the future is out there for those who are bold, those who believe and understand that my passion is in front of me. I'm going to live with purpose. I'm going to follow my calling. And I'm going to try and get smarter every day by improving, evolving my intelligence about how to build better and better solutions for problems that for most people seem unchangeable. We've been given a great gift, and it's the gift of life and creativity that God has given us. And I really encourage all of you to seize that opportunity. Pursue your dream. Life is too short to follow someone else's dream. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight. I think we're going to have the opportunity for you to make criticisms and critiques, and ask your questions or ask about something you'd like to pursue. Anything. I'm happy to hear all your questions.
Anybody have a question?
There's one over there.
So when you're starting these businesses, it sounds like you have a lot of connections. Like in the 8 a.m. talk, you talked about Jamie Oliver. And how would you recommend getting in the door of these big names and big people? I mean, you have to have some sort of base. Not anybody can just kind of walk in. Like, what are steps coming out of college that we can take to establish these just connections?
No, I appreciate that. You know, it's a good question because you say, well, how do I start my own pathway, my own journey? And, I'm sure I can identify with most of you in the room. I went to a small Christian college. I didn't go to Yale or Harvard or Stanford, right? So, there's all these opportunities that kids with a lot of money and, they network and connections, they start things. So, I'm from Westmont College. I'm not from a wealthy family. My parents were not entrepreneurs. They had very humble jobs. And so, where do I start? And I really do believe it when I talk about passion, is that I think each of you knows what really makes you passionate, what you really love to do, what fills your heart. But we feel like that's something I can't pursue as a lifestyle, it's something that I have to do on a Saturday. So the first is figuring out what that passion is. Now, I had a young woman this morning said, my problem is I have too many passions. Right? I'm passionate about all kinds of things. Right? So really it's just choosing one passion. For me it was, I'm going to go to a year working with kids who were troubled. They were in the streets of Melbourne. I'm just going to go, and I don't know where it's going to lead. I was just going to find that 1 year. That one step, though, changed my life. The problem is when we don't take a step because we feel paralyzed that we don't know what we should do. Right? Maybe I'll make the wrong thing. We act as if somehow if we take the wrong step that our lives are ruined. The opposite. Whatever step you take is the right step, because it's going to teach you something about where your next step should go, even if it's 2 steps back. Now, in terms of business, if you're an entrepreneur and you really want to pursue some of the types of projects that I talked about, maybe the future of transport, the future of energy, future of medical care, everything's going to change. You guys are in a lucky, lucky time in life. On one way, you say, oh my God, it sucks. We went through COVID. Right? It doesn't feel like there's any good jobs out there. I was born at the wrong time. That's completely the wrong perception of the world. In the next 10 years, next 20 years, everything's going to change. We've seen it start with COVID. The way the healthcare works, the way that energy works, the way that mobility, that is how we move vehicles, the way that we communicate, virtual reality and meta, all that's coming. Now, it's scary, it's different, it's unknown to me. Just throw yourself into it. Take one step towards it. Get an internship. Start a small project. Get a job that's at the bottom of the totem pole in a company that you really want to work in. But take a step, for gosh sakes. Don't just be paralyzed and do nothing. So, it sounds simple. Take your first step. That's what you need to do. But it will take you to the place you need to be.
You talked a little bit about how you moved into electric vehicles and batteries and things like that because it was a growth industry. Thinking about the increasing secularization of the West and the rise of the nuns, as we say, have you thought about how it might be a growth industry to channel the desires of larger and larger numbers of people to do good things, things that formerly were done through churches, sort of through a whole different set of structures, but now that these people are not going to churches, they still may have those desires, and that becomes a growth industry for companies like you have.
Right. I think I understand the question. It has to do with how we devote resources and priorities on those resources. The question is. Yeah, go ahead. I hear you well. Without the mic, the mic kind of distorts it a bit.
Okay. Yeah. My thought is that there's a real downside of having people become more secularized. We know the downside of that. But an upside, if you're thinking creatively as an entrepreneur, is that you have more and more people who want to do something good for other people, but they no longer have the church as a channel for doing good. So there's a growth industry there for people who can help those folks channel their good desires into doing the kinds of things that need to be done.
No, okay, thank you very much. A better understanding of your question. And I really do encourage young entrepreneurs to find those communities that are going to support their early endeavors, because it's very difficult to find an investor who will put money into an idea that's not proven. But how do you prove that idea, or how do you start to build what I call a minimal viable product, or an MVP? Usually it's going to be the people around you believe in you and want to participate in supporting you. It could be a church, it could be a community, it could be your friends and family, right? But if you don't have that, those networks are so important to building kind of the first step of your process, right? So most of the companies I've built, my first investments have come from people who believe in me. And actually it's really interesting is that even now, as you start to kind of use social media, or you're building your friendships, your network, your community, not in so much a Machiavellian or a kind of exploitive way, but you build the network of people who you value and they value you, right? There's a beginning of it. That's on a kind of a personal entrepreneurial level, but also I think about this a lot in terms of, say, the projects that we're building. Say we're building a big manufacturing plant for batteries. So these are big investments. A lot of money is going towards centralized production. But I think about how would you decentralize this so that you can make them available for communities. So what I love about the battery technology we're doing is that you can make enough batteries to compete with a big Tesla plant using our technology. It's called 3D printing. Or you can just make a very small mini factory because it's microprocessing. It's one small 3D battery printing. You could go to Colombia or Ghana, or you can go to anywhere in the world and make a small battery factory. So how do you create production locally for people who otherwise miss out on what's happening in major industrial centers like Germany and the United States. How do you take that same technology and apply it so it's access for communities so that they have resources? I mean, my dream is to be able to, and I'm working with a friend on this, this is kind of a dream project, is to be able to take a machine that's about the size of a container of a ship, and it enables you to purify water, because clean water is a real problem in the world, right? So it can purify water, but then also take some of that water and make hydrogen that would enable you to run your vehicles so that each little community can have its own clean water and energy in one unit. So you're taking technology at a large scale and you distribute it back out to communities who will not have that opportunity. And so I guess distribution of resources is enormous, whether it's investment, whether it's personal, or whether it's community. Thinking strategically about the future of the world that you want to live in and be a part of is really significant. One project I just talked very briefly about today that we're working on at a company is using cow manure, turning it into methane, turning it into hydrogen, converting the dairy trucks or the cattle trucks, so now the cow manure is powering the vehicle taking the milk to the market. Right? That can happen in Idaho, where we're doing the first project. That can happen in Iowa. It's decentralized production of energy. We're not reliant on Shell, we're reliant on Mabel the cow. Right? This is what I love dreaming about what that future looks like. So let your imagination go and then try and figure out how you would make that first thing happen and who's going to support you in doing so. Who's your community? It's a really good and important question.
I'll talk really loud. There we go. So David, thank you for being here. I know, as we did in the classrooms earlier, you're willing to stick around. Somebody may have a question that they just don't want to ask in front of the group, so we'll make sure that you're here for a few minutes. But hey folks, thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. This was really the inaugural keynote speaker series launched by the Kim and Kathy Doima Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. So we're very happy that David was willing to kick this off for us. And I know that there's a lot of things that were talked about today to stir some of that passion in you as well. And we're thankful for our other departments that chipped in to help pull this whole thing off. A special thanks to Vicki Vermeer and all the work that she did to put this whole thing together. We're very grateful for all of the work that she did. And I'll take the advantage of the microphone with one last simple question. And that is, when we're dealing with young minds today, or when you're looking for talent, talk to us ever so briefly about the difference between skill set and mindset.
Sure. Mindset is so much more important than skill set. That you can take a super talented person, but perhaps they do not have a belief in their own persistence. See, I'm a writer. I write, as I said, I wrote for many New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Wired, and then I also wrote books. I'm not the best writer in the world. I went to school with people who are better writers. I'm just persistent, all right? So if you come to a job interview, I'm not only looking, well, how talented you are, but also what have you worked through in order to achieve something? What have you done? You said, yeah, I went to Dordt University. Oh, really? What did you do when you were there? I went to class. Okay, what else did you do? Oh, I went to class, then the cafeteria. I go, what the heck? What were you doing for 4 years? Show me something. It doesn't have to be, I created a new kind of, nuclear submarine or something. It just show me something, that you had some passion, that you had some purpose, that you tried something, you built something, you failed. I don't care if you failed. So it's not even about the most talented person in the room. It's the person who is willing to take an adventure and move towards their dream and their passion. Those are the people I look for.